Welcome to another episode of the Recovering Cinderella podcast. Real stories of hope, inspiration, and advice from women who have made it through divorce for women going through it. My name is Keri Lauderdale Olson. I'm also known as Recovering Cinderella. I'm a master certified life coach specializing in empowering women to move forward after their divorce and create lives they love. Today's episode, we have Chris from Iowa, who's going to share her story of divorce and rebuilding a new life for herself after divorce. She lives in Iowa. Chris, welcome to the Recovering Cinderella podcast.
Hi, Keri. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. I'm so proud of how far you've come and allowing the empowerment of other women.
Oh,
this is great.
Thank you so much. So, I actually have known Chris for several years and actually knew her when she was going through her divorce. So several years ago. So Chris, why don't you talk about how long you were married and kind of how things started for you?
Yeah, great. I was just cresting onto my 20th anniversary and was married for 19 3/4 years, 3 beautiful children, and reinvented myself several times over that time frame. Have now since been divorced for 7 years. So it's a lot of good insights and information about how you rebuild yourself, the different phases that people can go through. But one thing I am adamant is everybody's journey is different. So I can share my experiences and what worked for me, and hopefully it will work for a select few people. However, just always be true to yourself and walk that walk and journey.
That is such great advice because, um, you know, part of this podcast, the reason I wanted to start it is because when you're going through a divorce, I think you feel alone. You feel like you're the only one who's felt this way. You feel like you're the only one going through it. And each divorce story is as individual as the person telling it, right? And yet there's pieces in there that somebody out there can hear and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who's done that. I'm not the only one who's gone through that. So I appreciate you being here to tell your story. So talk a little bit about your marriage, almost 20 years. Did you get married young? What was your situation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was married young, so I seldom dated in high school. I was a bit of a tomboy. Met my husband then, starter husband, I guess, at the time, and we were 10 years apart, 9 years apart. Sorry about that, just shy of 10 years. And so that created some unique opportunities and some unique challenges in and of itself, but we immediately had children. And so I say that we never really got to date and have that kind of love story evolve and unfold. And we didn't find out all of the nuances that obviously marriage can challenge. So we became dairy farmers, moved to his family's farm, and we're about 15 feet from his parents' home. So
Wow.
we were all there living in the complex, milking a bunch of
the
cows.
whole family right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So any dairy farmers can relate, any farmers in general. It's a very different culture and a unique one. So all of a sudden I'm thrust from young, outgoing college person finding my way to mom, married. And I had 2 children, 11 months apart. So it was kind of like having twins. And then you had the milking, and you had, the work in town because we needed insurance benefits, living in a mobile home on this dairy farm, working a lot. You just never really fully got to have a married experience, if you will, or you were thrust into a married experience. And fast forward to a farm crisis during the middle part of our marriage that created another opportunity. And so I went back to nursing school, then followed up with my bachelor's degree in kinesiology and public health. And then I formulated the career, and I got us to a point where I was on a mission to save the farm. And so by doing that, I found outside outlets, people, support, friends, and I realized, you know what? I can do things that I didn't know I was capable of doing, or that I was already doing. So I think that's a key point for anyone listening is believe in yourself. And even though you're doing hard things, never give up on yourself, and continue to find yourself again. If not during that time of marriage, I don't call it being selfish anymore. I call it being healthy.
That's that's awesome. I mean, and then that is so true because I think we get wrapped up, and especially you were in a marriage where there was almost 10 years age difference. So
Yeah.
you were still kind of figuring out who you were, and all of a sudden you're a wife and you're a mom and you're, helping run this farm, and so you didn't get a lot of time to figure out who you were. And then all of a
Absolutely.
sudden you're out in the world and you're working and you're going to school and you're like, wow, there's a whole nother world out here that I belong to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. And then what that allows you to do is just have some outside sources. So if you start becoming just connected to the two of you, yes, that's important, but just as much, you need a way time, and you need to develop into your own woman, your own being, your own self. And I just think that's hypercritical. And one critical point that I'll share with you. So after the divorce, basically had very little friend or outside force because I'd put myself through 2 college degrees, worked full time on the weekends. So I worked a 32-hour weekend package to get additional money and benefits, went to nursing school, and then, my bachelor's degree post nursing school. I would do clinicals at night. So I didn't have a single moment. And I'm trying to raise these babies. So that created another problem. But we needed to save this farm, right? Because that was our dream. Well, long story short, we got out, we saved the farm, but it didn't look the same. It looked different. My ex-husband became very mentally ill. He couldn't reinvent himself. And so that's a challenge. So we moved off of the farm, still maintaining kind of some rental income there. And that was probably a pivotal point for us, is getting removed from that family structure, making our own way. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to save this. Well, I'm here to tell you, just removing yourself from that environment, if you're both not willing to change and adapt and grow, it's never going to work. And if you're not willing to get help for yourself, I'm not saying I wasn't at fault. It takes two people. We were growing in completely different directions. And I would almost say that he wasn't growing at all. He wanted to go back to the way things were and the glory days and just have someone taking care of him. And that's not his fault. It's just we were two very different people at that point.
That's not what you wanted anymore, right?
Correct.
You had grown into this person who wanted more out of life and you were willing to embrace those changes. But to your point, if you're not with somebody who's also willing to grow, then you're in two opposite directions. And that's a
Absolutely.
tough place to be. So that was was there a certain point when you realized this isn't, this isn't going to work? This isn't going to work.
Yeah, yeah. So I paid for him to go back to college. I said, you've got to go find work. So at this point, he hasn't been working as a displaced dairy farmer for a couple of years. Um, and I said, this isn't a stay-at-home dad opportunity. You need to reinvent yourself. And so we got him into some schooling, paid for his college. And one day I said, are you going to get work? And are you going to help contribute here? And when is the school? When's the next classes? And what's going on? And he finally admitted to me that he had failed, which he wasn't willing to admit, and he was no longer going to college.
And you didn't know,
So
you assumed he was still going, right?
yeah, so on Tuesday and Thursday nights, I was thinking, where are you headed, bud? And that was a real challenge. So I felt A, betrayed, B, financially stuck. And my parents had come to visit, and my dad is a craftsman. So he was helping make some bedrooms down in the basement and finish them for our children. And my then husband said, oh, Chris is not going to like that you put those shelves in backwards. The painted edge is not out. Meanwhile, he had been sitting around. And now I will give him grace. He had had hernia surgery earlier that week. However, this was pretty common that he would sit and watch my dad, and then for him to criticize, and my dad finally lost it. My dad is a very calm man. He's a man of few words. And he told my mom, let's get our things and let's go. And I had never seen my dad upset at that point. And he just looked at my ex-husband and said, I am done. I am not going to come to your home, fix things, improve things. And I'm telling you, my daughter, if she's not smart enough to get out of this, I'm not coming back. And you're going to criticize me while you're lazy. And he said, I'm never going to watch her not have a hot meal again while she is a servant to you. And he told my mom that this is not the way marriages work. And my mom and dad have a wonderful, wonderful marriage and relationship. And so they got in the car and he looked at me as he was leaving and he said, I hope you figure it out. I love you. I'm here to support you, but I can't support this.
But
That was the point.
I
Yeah.
mean, did you at that point realize how bad it was, or had you not, you just had gotten used to doing the way it
Yeah.
was?
You get numb. I mean, I think we've all been there. You get numb and you just go through and you feel trapped, so it's like, what's going on? And finally, I just thought, okay, he's not working. He's costing me money. I'm raising these kids anyway. I'm not a bit happy. I can't handle the emotional turmoil, the finances were a huge part of this. Always spending and covering up and not telling the truth. I don't know of any other, challenges there, but that in and of itself was enough. And you just realize all of a sudden when you step outside and you look in, I could tell other people, oh wow, how are you putting up with this? And yet I couldn't do that in my own life. And I thought these girls and my son need to know what a real relationship, a healthy relationship looks like. And I'm not doing them any service. And it was really challenging. I mean, our community, our small community was rocked that, oh my gosh, if these people who appear to be the perfect family can't make it, what's in it for us? And I don't ever want anybody to think that because you don't know what's going on in anybody's lives.
Everybody, I think even when I went through my first divorce or even my second divorce, there was this perception that, you try to make everything look good. You try to, everything looks perfect from the outside. And I think that's a defense mechanism, right? We want the outside world to see this perfect family because that's really what we want inside. And that's often not the case. So images and perception can be deceiving, but especially in a small community, wow, that had to be really tough for
Yeah.
you
Oh,
to
yeah.
navigate. Did you guys both stay in the same community then after your divorce?
So we did not because he needed to get a job. So I helped set him up with a job and home to rent from some friends of ours. And we moved him to a neighboring community and got him all settled in. I feel like I didn't really divorce. I felt like I sent a kid off to college, which is really kind of sad. I know. People are like, you did what? And then he started getting lonely and crying, and I was really worried about his mental well-being. And he said, in 6 months, I will sign this divorce paperwork if in 6 months, once our son graduates, you move down here to this community and we co-parent. And I agreed to that because I felt it was very important that they had a mom and a dad. And so we did. We picked up and we moved out of that community. And I would almost say that was one of the best things I could do because in that community, it was very split. And friendships, you really find out who your friends are. And it's really quite difficult. So for us to move and reinvent ourselves, but he was crying. He was doing a lot of things. Once I moved and bought a house there on the other side of town. So we got him a girlfriend. We got him on an online dating site. And so he came over to my house and he was weepy and said, I'm going to meet this woman and her friends. This is the second date and I really need to make a good impression, but I don't have any gas money and I can't get there. And this is a pivotal point. And so I gave him $20 and I gave him a quote and I said, now you go get him, Tiger, and please make sure that you're successful here because you need this. And I can't have you coming and crying on my porch and being weak for our children. And so I always say, I set him up with a job. and found him a place and got him a girlfriend. And I'll tell you, that was the best $20 investment I could have made in my own future.
Now that is being supportive.
Yes, yes, yes. So, and and again, you don't want your kids to know all the intricacies and the inner workings. So you just kind of, get through it. And oh, the funniest thing though, you were saying, alluding that there's some dating that goes on afterwards. So when I dumped the dead weight, immediately I started climbing the corporate ladder. I had to take care of these kids. I had no child support. We agreed to waive all of this stuff just to so that I wasn't paying him in essence, because he was at that point a displaced homemaker.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I secured my financial future that way. And I found myself as a CEO of a major organization for our state. And it just was unreal to me that I was able to be that successful. But I had climbed that mountain for so long, and I had overcome and reinvented myself. And yet when you get there and you feel like, oh, good, this career and this money will fix everything, it doesn't. You still have to work on yourself. And so, fast forward to find some work-life balance, I transitioned out. Somebody said, why would you ever leave a CEO position? Yeah, I think there are more important things in life. And once I loved myself and realized I didn't have to work that hard and struggle and play the politics, and I could do things that were fulfilling and rewarding, that's when life really changed for me.
That's powerful. And, other women who have come on the podcast have said the same thing, that you have to learn how to love yourself. And so often we tend to put everybody else ahead of ourselves. We have some similarities in our story. I had 3 kids in 3 years. I went back to school and got my degree while I was still married. I climbed the corporate ladder. I was never a CEO, but that whole thing is you're searching, you're giving to everybody else, and you're searching for something to make you happy. And at the end of the day, if you don't love yourself and you haven't reconciled all of these hurts and everything in your life, then it's hard to do that. But
Absolutely.
it's still a hole, right? You still have this hole
Mhm.
until you learn to love yourself. So how did you go about learning to love yourself?
So, yeah, the online dating is where you had to go, because as a person that had some prominent um, work, you had to be very careful. You couldn't really date inside the corporate family, meaning agriculture and healthcare organizations are primarily where I worked.
I'm going to stop you right there, because I think the online dating is a part, but I want to know, because we'll talk about dating in a minute. How did you kind of reconcile learning to love yourself, though?
Yeah, so that
Oh, this is
this
part
was
of it.
my
Okay.
yeah. So when I went in to fill out the profile, they ask you all of these questions about yourself. And I started filling out the questions, and they asked about what you like to do. What are your hobbies? Who are you as a person? And I just stopped on the profile and I broke down and bawled. And I bawled hard. And I just shuddered, and I thought, what is wrong with me? And I looked around, and I thought, milking cows and cooking food for my family and serving in that servant role was not a checkbox option. And for that many years, I had no life outside of work and servants. See, and I just thought, I don't have friends. I don't have hobbies. He isolated me. And I don't know that he did that on purpose. I'm not trying to say that that was it was part of the broken pieces of the marriage. It was part of the work that we did. And I thought, I can't finish this. I can't online date. I don't have a profile because I don't have a personality. And that's when I went, oh my, where do I go from here? And all of a sudden, I started Googling, because that's what we do, how to find yourself. started listening to podcasts. I started listening to upbeat, empowering things. And what I did is I went out, and the people that I admired were out doing really awesome things. And I bought a kayak, and I bought a pickup, and I bought a bicycle. And this was over a period of a couple of years, but the kayak was first. And I started kayaking. And when I went out on that kayak, I thought, you know what, I can load this, I can put it in the water, I can collect my thoughts. And that was so freeing and empowering. And but with the pickup, I could haul anything I needed to haul, and I didn't need to rely on anybody. I then bought a four-wheeler, and I just enjoyed. So when I went on that online profile, I love to go four-wheeling, I love to go kayaking, and I love to bike. And part of that came after the dating. You know, there were people that had interests, and I was like, oh, wow, I really love this. I'm going to
Try
get
that.
involved in this. And then you could try a lot of things. And I'm not suggesting go out and buy a lot of things. I mean, again, this was over a major period of time, but find out where you are and who you are and what makes you happy. And a lot of people after divorce get involved in working out. You know, I'm going to work out because I'm going to fill the void and I don't have to deal with it. Well, I did the same thing, and I fluctuated and went from, training for a sprint triathlon, which was not going to fulfill me. I was just grasping what's going to make me feel good and give me validation, because I was missing it, because I had the old, cast and reel mentality. I don't know if anybody else had that in a marriage, but it was, I'm going to give you compliments, and then I'm going to break you down. I'm going to give you compliments and break you down.
Yeah.
And so you were constantly, and so I didn't have that anymore. And I was like, where am I going to get this? And so I was searching, but that's how I reinvented myself, truly was. And so whatever you can do, take classes, better yourself, love yourself. I went to a spa day. We went to a Kansas City Chiefs football game with some girlfriends. I mean, that all helps.
I was at that
Exchanging
game.
stories. Yay! Yes.
No, that's really, really solid advice. And, one of the things that I found, and I actually, in my coaching, this is one of the exercises I do with women, is I have them go through this series of exercises, because when you ask a woman who's been married like you 20 years, and then you ask them, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? And a lot of times I hear, well, John played golf, so I learned how to play golf. Or, John bowled, so I learned how to bowl, or whatever it is. And you don't even realize how much of yourself has gotten lost in the process, to the point, like you said, you don't even know who you are or what you like to do. And I remember for me, when I went through my first divorce, I'd never had time to do anything. And I was coaching Little League Baseball, and I was a Cub Scout leader, and I had 3 kids, and I was a single mom, and I was working, and I was traveling. And it took years for me to start to figure out who I was. And the kayaking is a big thing for me too. I remember my divorce wasn't even final yet. I was on a business trip in California, and we had to be there at 3 a.m. because we were filming something for the West Coast and the East Coast. And it was on Monterey Bay. And I remember seeing these kayakers out on the bay all morning as the sun was coming up. And I'm like, I want to do that. I've never done anything like that. I want to do that. I want to try. And I literally, driving back to the hotel, saw a kayak rental place. I'm in a suit. I was wearing a business suit at the time. And I stopped in and I said, I want to do this. What do I need to do? And they're like, well, we can rent you a wetsuit. And I'm like, do I really need one? And they asked where I was from. And when I said Missouri, they started laughing at me because it was October in Northern California. And so I rented a wetsuit, I rented a kayak, and I tumped the first 2 times out, and I didn't have the upper body strength to pull myself into the kayak. So I swam back to shore with the kayak. And the third time, I'm like, by the time I made it out into where we were into the ocean, or I was in the ocean, I was like, okay, I can't tump now because that's too long of a swim. But I kayaked all the way down to that bay area that I had seen all morning, and all the way back. And that feeling of empowerment, and it was a turning point for me. it was this, I can do this. I can do this on my own. And I'd never done anything like it. And I didn't need anybody to do it with me. I was doing it on my own. And as I look back over my healing from my divorce, that was a pivotal point for me. And so I think it's so key to find, like you said, find things that you like to do and try new things, because you may decide that you like kayaking, or you may decide or figure out that you like hiking, or you may decide you like to play golf. But until you figure out those things, you're not going to know who you are.
Absolutely. So many times I was therapy averse, and I just think whether it's a certified life coach, or it's a mental health therapist, or a psychiatrist, whomever, talk to people, because at some point you really, when you're so sad and you're so angry and you're going through these things. And the other thing is, I thought the emotions of grief were linear. I kept thinking, oh yeah, here I'm way past this point, I'm doing great. Well, the next day I'm clear back at square one.
Mhm.
It's a circle, it's round, and it's very crazy that you keep going through all of those phases. And it's okay. You can go back to stage one. You can be angry when you're not technically supposed to be angry. There's no rhyme or reason. It's your journey. It's your adventure, and it's not linear, guys. I hate to say it, but even years later, there are still moments where you look back and you get really sad. Now, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I went through a series of EMDR training. So now I have memories, but they're not the painful, life-altering memories going through that process. Two of my children were diagnosed with the same, and so they went through a series of therapy. Don't be scared of it, and don't be embarrassed. And I tell this story because we're all human. We need to get through it. And the other thing that I did, that therapist recommended I write a goodbye letter to myself, my former self. So I looked at that letter and I talked about all the things I'm going to miss. And I said my name and etc. And it was just so crazy to write that goodbye. And then you write your hello letter. And I've added to my hello letter and what I'm excited about and where I'm headed and what's going to happen. And I'll tell you what, I achieved all of my short term and most of my long term goals. And I think that's incredible in 7 years.
Yes, it is. That's amazing. Let me give you some applause for that. So you're 7 years out. What are are you comfortable sharing some of the things that you've achieved 7 years out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've graduated all my children. I'm an empty nester. They're all successful and doing well. I have purchased a lake property, and so I go there regularly. And that was a place that was not ours before, not my and my new partners. It's a place for my children and my family to have a safe space that is super fun, that is just so chill and relaxed. And we have what we call porch time in our family. So if anything's bothering you or things are going on, you come to the lake, you remove yourself from the regular world, you get some porch time with mom, without mom, with the siblings, and we just laugh and we carry on, and we have a pontoon. And that pontoon is a 1988 Crestliner, and her name is Stella. She's an old blue hair, but she's still a runner. And I just love Stella because I learned how to run an outboard motor. I learned how to mix the oil and the gas. I learned how to do things that made me feel empowered. And so people on the lake community, when I go visit, are like, we just can't believe what a wonderful, dynamic, powerful person you are. I could never do that. And I said, oh, honey, you can do anything you set your mind to. And so I pride myself that I've reinvented myself, and I feel so good that, guess what? I can do this. And I did not find the partner. I dated a lot, and I can, Keri and I, we've gone through these dating stories. I mean, you just got to keep fishing, girl. You got to keep pulling in and using some different bait. But I finally, once I learned who I was and I loved myself, this whole positive world opened up. And this man that I have met we are both very independent, and yet we're really good together and we complement each other. We've learned to both give and take. So I think once that is achieved, you're healthy enough to give of yourself. But the thing that I love is he just as much gives to me and I give to him. And that was such a foreign concept. And it's very uncomfortable for us. Sometimes we're like, ooh, we're getting into the ouchy parts. That's uncomfortable. Either he has a little bit of baggage or I have a little bit of baggage. And the thing is, we accept each other's baggage and we just laugh and we're just our true selves. And it's so awesome to find that. And it's very rare and it's treasured. So I think I'm just so much more mature and equipped because I spent that time. He spent 7 years alone or 6 years alone. I spent the 7 years alone, and that was key.
That is so important, is that when you are in a good place emotionally and healthy and you know who you are, you attract that. And so if you try to date when you're this emotional mess and chaos, that's what you attract. And you and I have talked about this over the years. We've both attracted that when we were not in a good place. And so it's awesome to see that now, you've met somebody who's also in a good place, and you complement each other and you're in a healthy relationship because of it. But you spent that time figuring out who you were, and you spent that time really digging into what you wanted and what you had to offer someone else and what you wanted in return, which is just as important, what you needed for yourself. And it's awesome to see you so happy and it's great. I'm just so happy for you. Okay. So looking back now, if there was one thing that you could tell someone going through a divorce now that you wish you'd known, what would it be?
Hmm. Well, I would say give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Give yourself a break. It's traumatic. I often say I would not wish this on my worst enemy ever. My younger sister, my only sister, has recently gone through a divorce, and I took her on a cruise, and she said, "What do you mean we're going on a cruise?" And I said, "You need it." And I've taken her to the lake and had porch time, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm such a mess. I'm such a wreck." And I watch her go through it, and I just hug her and smile and say, "You have no idea. I was there. I understand it's tough. I don't understand your personal journey and your story, but I do understand there's trauma. And I want you to love yourself and build yourself up." And I would send her positive quotes. So I would say, surround yourself with great people, a very strong support network, people who can see you ugly, cry, pig out, get fat, eat popcorn, go on these binges where then you exercise, just all of the gamut. You could be one day riding your bike 40 miles and the next day binging on Rocky Road ice cream in front of your blankie. I mean, it's okay. So give yourself grace. And whether that's faith or family or a support network of friends, find you, believe in yourself, and you'll be awesome. And know that your journey is unique, and you are a wonderful, beautiful individual. I just think that's so true. People are people.
That's awesome. Great advice. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know somebody out there listening can relate to part of it, even though they're on their own journey, and just to understand it gets better. It gets better. You're 7 years down the road. You've taken some twists and turns. You're so right about grief being in a circle. It can be, even when you least expect it, years later, sometimes it hits me that, my family is not intact, right? I wish I could give that to my kids. And so there are things that'll hit you, but you can still move forward. Each day is a step forward.
Yes.
So thank you, Chris, for being on the podcast. Really happy to have you on and appreciate you telling your story. If you are listening and you're interested you have your own Recovering Cinderella story that you would like to share, you can apply to be on the Recovering Cinderella podcast at recoveringcinderella.com. If you are interested in getting your own coaching to help you through I do both one-on-one personal divorce coaching for women ready to move forward to the next step of their lives and helping them figure out who they are and moving forward. I also do small group coaching where I put together groups of 6 to 8 women to help empower each other and lift each other up and truly understand where you're coming from. So you can find out more about both of those on my website at recoveringcinderella.com. If you're not following me on Facebook or Instagram, I'm Recovering Cinderella. And just join us next week for another inspiring story, because it doesn't matter what your story is, you're not alone. There's somebody out there who has, can give you some inspiration and some hope and help you realize that it does get better. So have a great week, beautiful. And remember, your story didn't end with your divorce. You are still writing it, and the next chapter is going to be even better than the last.